Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Scary Stories We Tell. I am one of your hosts, Chris Stashu.
And I am your other host. I always forget that you don't say a segue and here I am with.
And here comes Jess Byard in on the segue. Aren't you glad those things aren't a thing anymore? Or are they?
Very.
No, I guess.
Don't think so. No,
well,
now like scooters and stuff are.
Oh,
again.
Yeah, like bird scooters.
Mm-hmm.
How much of a dickhead do you look riding a bird scooter? Like scale of like always to guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
Right? I don't get those things at all. Like,
look, if you don't have transportation,
it's not for that. I don't feel like it's that, though. I feel like it's a bunch of like drunk tourists riding them in cities where the people who actually live in those cities are annoyed that people are doing it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Do you think like
I am annoyed? We have a scooter thing here. It's not Bird, but it's some other company that does the same thing. And what I get most annoyed about is that people just like leave them in the middle of the sidewalk, just like laying in the middle of the sidewalk. Like, well, I can't ride this anymore.
I am done now.
Done. Hey.
The most thankless of thankless jobs is the person who has to go and collect all of them to charge them.
Right, exactly.
Or funny, depending on how you view it. I mean, it's almost like a game. Like, where can I hide the scooter so that the scooter person can't find it?
I'm sure because they all have like the GPS chips or whatever the fuck in them.
I would assume so. Those things have got to be expensive. They're not like $5. They're like engines in them, right? They're like electric. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they can be used as transportation, like minimal transportation. But also, I don't know how the sidewalks are in your part of Nebraska, but in my part of Ohio, they're crap. They're absolute shit. They are not for pedestrians. They're for no one. They're for people who like obstacle courses.
Right. Hopscotch from hell, baby.
Right. Like most of them are, coming up out of the ground and have a bunch of chips. Yeah, exactly. Like they're just jutting out everywhere. There's bricks missing. There's just it doesn't feel like it's a good environment for a scooter, right?
Good way to eat shit on the scooter.
Exactly.
So speaking of places that their sidewalks are probably no better than ours, we're going to be doing another haunted state this episode, folks. We're going to be talking about the other state that's not contiguous with the United States. That state being the lovely state of Alaska. Now, Jess, have you been to Alaska?
I have not. I am good. I don't like the cold. It is always cold.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, I like the cold, but I get not liking the cold. I'm ambivalent now. I'm ambivalent to the cold and the warm. I'm just I
hate it more every year.
Because you're getting more jacked, bro. You're getting more swole. You're getting more trim. And the trimmer you get, the colder it is because you have less body fat.
True. But it hurts my bones.
That's also fair. I have been to Alaska. I went in, let's say, the year of our Lord 2006. So I would have been 16. We went, of all the things we went to go do with my family, we went fishing, which is, my family at the time didn't eat fish. So it was like, we're going to Alaska to fish for salmon that we are then not going to eat. And even better, there's a funny addendum to the story. I think it was like 2007, maybe 2008. On my birthday, I went out to the freezer to get the ice cream cake that my mom had gotten for me. And it was like a chest freezer. Well, I was the one who opened the freezer to find out that the freezer had stopped working with about 100 pounds of fish in it. I remember opening it just being like, oh God, no. I just closed it and walked back in the house and I was like,
it's all ruined.
I think the freezer may have stopped working. Mind you, my birthday is end of April in Texas. It's not cold. It's pretty warm. That thing had been sitting out there for a little, getting a little ferment a little bit, get those juices going. I don't even think my parents did anything with the freezer other than tape that fucker closed and put it on the sidewalk for the trash people to take away. God.
Please.
Don't open it.
Away.
Whatever you do, don't open it. It's like Dracula's coffin.
So did you like fly fish? Were you like standing in the rolling waves with your big pants and your
With my big pants.
line? Yeah,
Yes.
like those big water pants.
They're called waders.
Sure.
I like water pants though. Come on down to Bass Pro Shops. We're selling half off water pants. Not nearly as exciting as what you might think water pants would be though. If I was buying a pair of pants called water pants, I would expect it to be like, you remember those, and I can only describe them as what many of us would later call a fleshlight. But you know that thing, that toy from when you were a kid, that like plastic.
Yeah. The rubbery, plasticky thing that's full of water and
that
like
turns inside out and turns in on itself. Yeah. That's what I would imagine water pants to be, like that. But you like put your legs in it.
So uncomfortable.
Would it though?
Oh,
be very buoyant.
They just fall off all the time.
What if you had like a belt? What if there were fish in the pants?
Well, then you'd probably break it.
The moment you sit down, it just explodes.
Exactly. Yeah.
My water broke, guys.
They're good for one night out only.
And you can't sit down. You have to be standing the entire time. No, we didn't do that kind of fishing. We did like fishing into like a river from like the boat, and it was so fucking stupid. They were like, all right, the salmon are just swimming down the river, and it's like you've got a hook and you're standing above a freeway and you're throwing a hook and trying to catch cars with it. And I was like, so it sounds impossible either way. So you're expected to throw the hook in the line,
winging a hook into the river,
and hoping that you
catch a fish
by luck, by the fish getting caught on your hook. So yeah, I've been to Alaska. We did what they consider fishing up there. And look, I've also been out on a boat fishing in Alaska. We fished for like flounder off of wherever we were, the Kenai Peninsula, probably. Let's say that because that's a real thing. It's fine. Look, here's the thing about Alaska, right? Alaska reminds me a lot of Maine. It's mountainous. It's kind of, sort of remote in a lot of places. I mean, the further north you go in Alaska, the more remote it gets. It's culturally very distinct though, because obviously they have indigenous people. They have the Inuits who are all over Alaska. So it's very culturally different from the United States, but it feels like Maine or like the Northeast. It has that same vibe to it. But, with giant fucking grizzly bears.
And
I knew a kid in high school who went to Alaska with his Boy Scout troop, and he got attacked by an actual fucking grizzly bear.
Holy shit.
And the only reason the kid is alive today. It got him. And the only reason he's alive is because the bear came from behind and grabbed his pack. But he had like scars on his face from where the bear had attacked him. And like, this was a kid that I knew through high school. The bear attacked his pack, and then the other thing that saved him was the fact that one of the scout leaders had a .50 caliber revolver with them, and he shot it at the bear. Yeah, fucking Alaska's scary. It's a pretty scary place. Lots of big animals, but there are moose in Maine. But there aren't necessarily some of the things we're going to be talking about on this episode in Maine. We're going to be talking about weird, haunted, and spooky things, as we always do on these Haunted State episodes. So, Jess, I'm going to kick it to you first now that we've given a substantial intro to Alaska, the state that many people often even forget exists because of it not being connected to the United States. Jess, what are we talking about in your case?
I was like, today.
What are we talking about? What story are you bringing to the table here?
So you had mentioned, Alaska was pretty populous with Inuit tribes. And so today I wanted to talk about the Qualupali. Pardon me if I pronounce that entirely wrong, but here we go. So basically this thing is part of my nightmares. It is an Arctic Ocean. First, anything that lives in the Arctic Ocean is 10 times scarier than anything that lives literally anywhere else in the world and on any surface. Like, that is a brutal climate and world to be living in. So they are essentially mermaids or sirens, but not in a typical Disney-fied princess pretty way, or even, a Greek mythology beautiful siren way. No, they are described as having a wraith-like appearance with black hair plastered to their essentially just sallow, scaly, fishy skin. And their faces are sunken in and have dark, hollow eyes. I don't know if that means they don't have eyes, like if it's just black void,
right,
or what. But they also have fins jutting out of their heads, backs, and arms, along with webbed feet and super sharp claws. So they're kind of shark-like in appearance, is what I'm gathering throughout this. Typically, the tail of the koala polite is used as a cautionary tale to warn children away from the cold waters because, in Alaska, way, way, way back when, even still, tribes have to work together to make sure everybody stays safe in these really harsh environments. And this was pretty much just a way to warn children to stay away from the ocean, like stay off the ice, stay out of the ocean. Because if you're caught by one of these non-alluring creatures, there one of two things can happen to you. Either you are just pulled down to the icy depths and you are ripped apart and consumed, or you are enchanted by magic so that the koala polite can then feed off your essence and remain youthful. So, typical child kidnapping monster tale here.
Right.
But I guess what makes them the most dangerous, according to the legend, is that you only see them for the instant that they appear to you, and then they disappear completely. So you won't see them coming. You won't hear them coming, although it is said to be that they have a smell of sulfur, but you don't smell it until it's right up on you. So that is what I found for creepy water monsters in Alaska, because that's what, that's my brand. I have to find something that lives in the water. And living in the Arctic Ocean is just horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. I would die. Nope, I don't need any part of going in the Arctic Ocean.
And, I think in a lot of ways, we talk about water monsters on this show before, because like you said, every time we do one of these haunted states, as long as it's not landlocked, there's normally like a water monster. I mean, especially if it's coastal, right? Like,
even still, I
think we did Nebraska. Rivers. There was like a thing in some pond that when it like jumped into the air and it like landed, it made like earthquakes and stuff. Look, anything that's underwater that you can't see is always going to be one of these things where it's like, what is it? Let me explain it. Let me find a way to explain it that satisfies my expectations. And if I'm not able to make those satisfy my expectations, then it's an alien, or then it's a whatever, or then it's a whatever, right? Like a monster or an alien or a Bigfoot. Like the moment we lose the ability to like understand things is the moment our brains go wild. But the thing about that is, if you know that and you have that expectation in mind, you can use a story like this to, I wouldn't say control, but I guess the word would be control, because this ultimately sounds like a cautionary tale for kids.
I mean, yeah, that is essentially what it is. And especially when we're talking about like areas that are prominent with indigenous peoples, there's a lot of indigenous legends and myths that are going to filter in to popular culture, popular lore. And most of those tales serve as cautionary tales in some way, or creation tales or something like that. Like there's generally, they're allegorical in some way. There's generally going to be a theme or a message.
Right. And look, I mean, it's cold in Alaska. You go into the water for too long, or not, like minutes if it's freezing, and you die.
Like it's the Arctic.
Right. You go out into the wild and you wander around and you get lost in the wilderness, you die. Like that's just the way it is. That's the way a place like this is. It's brutal, it's unforgiving, and a lot of it is not undiscovered, but it's not necessarily charted. People aren't out in the wilderness of Alaska all the time. And so if you're a parent, you're sitting there and saying, well, how do I get my kid to not wander out of the tent, the igloo, what have you? You go, oh, there's a monster out there, so don't go out there.
Is that why we have like monster on the bed, under the bed, and in the closet? Like, just don't get out of bed.
Well, that's like the question.
To get parents to be like, just stay in your bed the whole night.
Well, that's the question, right? It could be. Don't come annoying, but at the same time, like, oh, they're in the closet, it's under the bed.
I'm just trying to figure out what suburban parent problems are versus indigenous people's problems of grizzly bears and Arctic oceans.
Well, that's a very interesting question, though. So let's kind of take a step back and look at it, logically. So if these stories were being created to, again, not control the behavior, but massage the behavior of these children to do something other than go out and get lost in the wilderness, play in the water, do what I guess most kids would do, right? Then, you would make a story about something where it's like, this monster lives in the water, but it can come on the land and it can take you away and you'll never come back and you never see your parents again. So don't fucking do it. So,
you'll die a horrible, horrible death.
Right. And like or not die and just be kept in stasis to be drained by some monster. But to your point, the question then becomes, is the analog to that the monster under the bed and monster in the closet? I guess in a more direct sense, yes, because if you're talking about like within the household, yes. But I think I wonder in where you grew up, was there a story like this that you heard where you grew up? I mean, maybe it's not some fish monster, but like a place you don't go.
Like in hindsight now that I see might be a warning just to not go there.
Right, because like that's the thing here. It's like you don't necessarily know what you're being warned against, but you know that whatever it is, you shouldn't be doing. Because again, the Qualupali, like it's not. I mean, again, real or not, I mean, it's mythology, it's folklore. So I respect the culture, but at the same time, I also respect the intention behind it because it is very useful to have stories like this in your back pocket. It's like stranger danger, right? Don't take candy from a person in a car.
In all of our urban legends. And I think for me, like in relative to where I grew up, there really wasn't a specific like warning, like do not go there thing. Like, of course, we had like the standard like haunted places, whatever, like Crybaby Bridges and things like that. But they weren't like, they were just stories of just like, whatever. They weren't, it's not that the bridge was unsafe to go on. It was just that like, that was just a story.
Best you knew though. Again,
best like, I knew.
Or maybe the people who were saying those stories thought it was.
Right. And maybe at some point somewhere it was, and then it just got turned into a bunch of different bridges. But I mean, that's just, like we talked about urban legends before. And that's effectively like what we have in, I think, Western culture is urban legends rather than folklore, right? Like, because our urban legends aren't necessarily spawned out of our belief systems as far as like culture goes, right? I mean, I guess they are, I guess in a way they are. Like if you take the Hookman story that everyone knows is a cautionary tale about, fooling around with your boyfriend in the car at night. And I mean, that is a part of our belief system. So, as in general, as Christian-based Protestant-based Westerners, that is an urban legend that was created out of a belief system that if you do these, sinful things, bad things will happen to you.
Promiscuity should be punished.
Our urban legends are less of a, we don't want our children to wander off and get eaten by a grizzly bear, and more our children are going to be suffering eternal damnation if they do these things.
which is very interesting if you think about it, right? Because in a number of ways, it almost feels less controlling when you think about the Kuala Lumpur as more of just a don't go do this because your life could be adversely affected. And look, I mean, if you are promiscuous with someone, your life could be adversely affected, but
sure,
could. If you go out into the wilderness and you freeze to death, your life is adversely affected.
If you go out to the wilderness and into the wilderness, especially as a child, but really at any age in a wilderness like Alaska, and you don't know what the fuck you're doing, you are going to die. That will absolutely happen. You are going to either get very injured and then die, or you are just going to succumb to whatever environment things are going to happen to you.
Right.
Like that is, you're going to be a part of the various people who vanished in the Alaskan wilderness, never to be seen again. But ours are like, you know, yes, if you are promiscuous sexually, there is the possibility that something adverse could happen to you, but it is not always going to happen to you. It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee that it will happen to you.
But that is the promise of something like the Hook Man, is like, don't put yourself in that position, because the bad thing that happens won't be the bad thing that you expect. You know, I mean, that's the thing, right? Because ultimately, you know, with something like the Kuala Lumpur, it's, yes, we all understand you go out into the wild and something gets you, or you could just die anyways. But
yeah, you could just fall in the water and freeze.
in this culture, death is a guarantee when you're away from the pack, when you're away from the rest of the people in your tribe, you know, moving clan, whatever it is. In Western society, in our culture, that's not the case. So it's like we almost have to make it where that is the case, right? Because again, the Hookman story is not really about promiscuity, right? I mean, it is, but that's
yeah, it is.
It's not like the guy took his dick out and all of a sudden she bit it off. Like, no, it's like they were fooling around and then the Hookman showed up. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's sex is always used as the reason something happens. And in these stories, it's like you going out and just existing is why these things happen.
Yes, exactly.
Like, you're doing something that you would probably be doing anyways, going out into the wilderness. But like this, it's like, again, you're doing something maybe you're not supposed to be doing. Again, that's the judgment call here. Like kids fooling around in their car is like oldest time in memoriam. Like they were fooling around in chariots and other things. Like since there has been a way to do something sexual in a small enclosed space that is a vehicle.
People have been doing it.
Right. Like carriages and everything. Like, this is not new. But these and these stories, I'm sure if you go back and look, there might even be stories like this in, like, you know, medieval England or other times when there were other things like this. Again, I think some of this also comes with the idea that these people have been granted a modicum of freedom that they maybe don't have. And now that they've been granted a modicum of freedom, we have to kind of push back on that culturally as well. Because that's the other thing. I mean, the advent of a story like the Hookman comes at the same time as cars being affordable for kids to own and go out into the world and have that level of autonomy. Because, you know, that's the thing ultimately that I think a lot of us as adults forget is being a kid, more aptly a teenager, sucked because we didn't have any autonomy. I couldn't just get in my car and go anywhere. I'm stuck wherever I am.
Yeah.
But the moment I have a car and I can leave, my parents are worrying about me, which means they need to start telling stories or concocting ideas or embellishing real things that have happened to make it like, well, if you go to the Lover's Lane or you go park
here,
will
absolutely happen to you.
Right. I can tell you with absolute certainty, I have fooled around in my car multiple times and I am yet to be murdered by a Hookman.
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
Unless I am murdering Hookman.
If I ever get murdered by a Hookman, you'll know what happened.
Right. Well, Jess was just fucking around in the car and got murdered.
At 30 plus years old.
Right.
As a
Hookman
fully
doesn't
functioning
discriminate.
adult.
He doesn't care.
Well, yes, fair. But yeah, I think that it's interesting to see where the, myths, urban legends, folklore, whatever you want to, whatever brand it is, they all come out of a sort of list of responsibilities we have deemed as a society, right? And for Westerners, our responsibilities are less about survival than other cultures and more about moral superiority.
Or explaining how the sun rises. Because again, that's where,
right.
Folklore comes from, like, oh, and then the scarab beetle is pushing the sun. And it's like,
right.
Yeah. I mean,
we don't have that. We have God.
Right. Or science, which is in and of itself a breed of God, right? Like, or a breed of belief.
Right. But if we're talking about folklore, I had to say God.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, again, like, creation myths. I mean, the Bible is a creation myth along with other things. Like,
yes, we just treat it more as than other people do.
We treat it. So here's the other thing about religion and the way that these kinds of stories and folklore exist. Like, the religion, Christianity, as we've seen it now in human history, is only like a couple thousand years old, right? Like, the world's been around much longer time. Like, this is a blip, right? Who knows 500 years from now if anyone is going to be part of an organized religion in the way that we are able to observe it now.
And then it will be viewed just like we view things like, why does the sun, tales from why does the sun come up? And, the turtle that holds the world and things like that.
Or the tides, or where do rivers come from? Or the Grand Canyon was formed when, X, Y, and Z did A, B, and C, and 1, 2, and 3 happened. Like, again, I don't want to boil mythology and folklore down to that, but that's the intention. It's always been the intention. It's either to
explain
or to entertain or to inform. Yes. But
because as people as a whole across cultures is learning and surviving and entertaining are like have been doing since the dawn of time.
Well, and the other question that I always have in all of this is, okay, so you have these stories of the Qualupilik and all these other things. I mean, again, we've talked about them before. What were they seeing if they were seeing anything? They were just seeing like a seal or something, right? Like, I'm not sure that.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I feel like in this case, in this particular story, it is nothing but a cautionary tale that was made up by elders in the tribe to keep young ones safe.
Right.
Like that I feel like that is absolutely without a doubt. This is just a pure cautionary tale to keep people alive. Now I think that like they're probably, because I am not, well versed in Inuit legends and lore and things like that. I'm sure that particular creature maybe comes from something in their belief system. I'm not sure. I don't know. But I gotta say that this is likely not like an American saying they saw Bigfoot.
Right. Well, I don't think they saw anything. I think that I think that this is purely a like folklore story, which is perfectly fine. Like, again, it's a cautionary tale, which doesn't necessarily have to mean that it has ever happened. Like,
right.
Because the Hookman is based off of real things, but that Hookman story, the way that it was told to me the first time I heard it, never happened. And I remember exactly where I was when I heard that. I was at Camp Klassen in 5th grade in elementary school, and that got told to me at night in a cabin. And I was, it was intended one way and it was received the exact same way.
Yes.
It was scary.
Mission accomplished.
Right. But I think about it and I think about why someone would have told that story to like a group of like 8-year-olds. And it's just,
To
again,
scare you probably
right.
because they were fucking teenage camp counselors. Like,
it was like an adult. It was like a chaperone.
are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure it was like someone who was there, his dad, because like each cabin had.
Well, I mean, even still, like we like as in this country, especially, have a very strange relationship with just wanting to terrify children.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is strange. I don't know what's the deal with that.
Like you play scary pranks on your kids, and you do, you tell them these scary stories. Like I don't know. I mean, I'm down for it. Obviously, I like the creepy stuff, but I don't know. Maybe it's because historically, like maybe we can just afford to joke around about things more. Like it's a privilegey thing.
Yeah, it's also safe. I mean, telling a story about something happening in the privacy and safety of your own home is safer than going out.
Also, like, I mean, look, like tall tales. There's an American, like telling tall tales is an American pastime. Like that, it's all about the embellishment. Like when you were talking about fishing, like if most people come back and tell they caught this huge ass fish, and was it that big? Probably not. It's probably decent size, standard size fish, but for whatever reason, we just the embellishment, and maybe that is a product of our culture kind of being on the like the appearances side of things, where it's like appearing that you have more than you do, appearing that you're more well put together than you are, appearing that you don't have these problems, things like that. Tall tales.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot of, in my mind, there's a lot of things going on when I think about these kinds of stories. Because again, it's how did it get here? The version that I'm hearing it is probably not the way it was told. The person who told it maybe didn't even anticipate that it was. I mean, again, that some storytellers tell the story and they know how they're going to tell it, and they know how the person who's receiving it is going to receive it, or at least they hope. But then you have someone telling it who is just telling it to tell it, and they don't care what happens to it after it gets told. But yet every time something is told like that, that becomes then an additional piece of string in this greater rope of the idea, and it takes it in interesting directions. I wish I could remember exactly the way the story was told to me, but I believe, and if memory serves me correctly, I believe the way that story was told to me was more or less the generic one. But it's interesting because ultimately at the end of the day, like these stories, the way we're hearing them now, a couple 100, 200, 300 years from now, they may even be different in what they're trying to do. Because again, it all comes down to the intent of the person telling it. And some people are just telling it to tell it. Some people aren't telling it with the intention of entertaining. They are telling it to scare and to frighten. And yeah, scaring kids seems like an adult pastime. And some adults really get off on it. I'm cool with it as long as everybody else is on the same page.
Right. Yeah.
And everybody's safe about it. Like, I got scared a couple times as a kid pretty good by an adult. Like, my parents left me to be babysat, and I watched like the people that were babysitting us, like they had kids as well. And for whatever reason, they put on Poltergeist.
Oh, great. Perfect. Family-friendly movie.
Right. And then at one point, the dad like went to the back of the house and got a mask and like jumped out with it on while we were all watching. Right. Like, and it's like.
Yeah. My mom, when whatever year it was, about 2003, out of 13, went to go see The Ring at the movie theater with my friend. Big deal, because like first time at the movie theaters without your parents, because you're 13, you're seeing a scary movie, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it was fucking scary. I fucking scared the shit out of me when I was in the theater seeing it. And we, go home because they're staying at my house that night. And of course, we still have a landline in the year 2003. And my mom, decides to call the landline from her cell phone because she also had one because it was 2003. So, yes, and that scared the crap out of us. So it is definitely a tradition here. And it could be elsewhere as well. I don't know.
Yeah, we can only speak to the culture we grew up in. But yeah, it's weird to me. But at the same time, I get it. But I think also, again, it's like a safe kind of scared because I mean, again, the world that we live in, there's plenty of real things to really be scared of constantly if you think about it. You know,
Oh yeah.
there used to be a time you could go to the fucking mall and not worry about it. You can't even do that anymore. So there's plenty of real scary things to really be scared of. Like
the one thing I will remember, I do remember this as being specific to where we live. In the 90s, at some point, at a mall around here in Northeast Ohio, there had been, I don't know if it actually happened, which I think that it did. Nobody was seriously hurt, but there was a person that was said to be hiding out under parked cars in the mall parking lot, waiting for women to come out to, slash their ankles, essentially. Allegedly, that happened in, one of the parking lots in a pretty popular mall around here, one that we went to all the time when I was a kid. Did that stop my mom and my nana from going there every weekend? Absolutely not. But did I hear the story? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Every single time, I bet.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard that story too in high school.
Right. Exactly.
But here in Nebraska, there's actually a fun addendum to that story that you brought up out of the blue. There was a dude here in Lincoln a couple years back. I think it was probably either during the pandemic or right before. He was doing something similar. He was hiding under people's cars and he was touching their ankles. That's all he was doing. He's touching their ankles, like touching their ankles and feet.
I would stomp his hand so fast.
Isn't that crazy?
Break every single finger.
Isn't that nuts though? Like that legit happened. The guy got arrested. It was like on the news. It was a thing like this. There was someone who was here who was doing exactly what you're talking about, short of slashing their ankles. Yeah. But he was just like touching their ankles. Like I mean, again, it is, I'm not going to say, obviously it's not that it's not illegal. It's weird, but it's not nearly as malicious as what, as we're talking about, like having your fucking, what I'm assuming is like your Achilles tendon slashed.
Right, exactly. What else? Yeah.
Right, because that's always what these stories are, because somebody saw Pet Sematary one too many times. but that for me is that thing. It's like, again, like you heard it, and that's like a notorious urban legend. I think that may even be included in the film Urban Legend.
No, that one isn't.
Really? Is it not? Okay.
The
Hook. Okay, yeah, that's not surprising. Yeah,
the Hook Man, the dog in the microwave, the
dog in the microwave is a good one. I like the baby in the oven more, but it's essentially the same idea.
Same, yeah.
Yeah. That we did that urban legend episode so long ago. I would love to do another one. Those are like I read like 1,000-page book on those fucking things. There are some that like I had never even heard of.
No, we should do a series of episodes breaking down like Western urban
mythology.
Legends where we think they come from, as far as like, what cautions they bring and things like that.
Yeah, because us talking about the Qualupilic, where we know about as much as we can find. That's it. We can't. I can't speak to.
Well, and that's the thing often about a lot of indigenous people's myths and legends is that most of them, so many of them have been lost that we'll never know. Right.
Right. Only the good ones get passed down, folks.
The ones that have been passed down, are probably have been very, over the years disintegrated a bit in the amount of knowledge and, people who are actively talking about them. So, and also in some cases, their legends do mean a lot to them very deeply, like that of the Wendigo in certain, indigenous people's culture, that you don't talk about it because talking about it brings it on. So
skinwalkers. We were not supposed to do a skinwalker episode, apparently. I mean,
right. I mean, we're fine.
Yeah. I get it's like Voldemort, right? Like, don't say his name.
Yeah. As Westerners, we're not affected by it because we don't actually have that real intrinsic fear about it.
It's not directly tied into our belief system.
No, but if we get a Catholic on this, a really hardcore Catholic on this podcast, I bet you they don't want to talk about anything to do with exorcisms and demons.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And that's, again, like, that strikes me as like modern mythology. Because again, just because you choose to believe religion the way you believe it doesn't really make it any less than mythology. It's just that you have a set of rules and moral compass guiding said decision, but it's still mythology. It still is explaining a lot of things that you want an explanation for, guiding
With
your
a lot
life.
of magic.
Right. Well, magic is the best part of all of this. I mean, I love when people use it as an explanation and they don't understand that using it as an explanation is not enough.
Right.
But it's like, but if it is enough for you, I understand, but you can't be surprised when it's not enough for so many others.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, look at it this way. Warning an American kid not to go by the water because there might be a monster in it is going to be like, ooh, I'm going to go to the water and see if I can find the monster. Like, that's
right.
Because that's how, we are. But, for people who are living in very difficult environments, it means more.
Right. Well, and they also have to be near the water anyways. I mean, they're already
their diet is primarily fish.
Right. Well, and they're having to interact with it. So it's like it's less like don't interact with it at all, but like interact with it in a way that's smart, right? Like don't get too close to the water. It's not that don't go to the water, just don't get too close, right?
Yeah, we have a very just don't at all
right
way about us, whereas like other places is a bit like, okay, we understand that you're still going to have to do these things, but just do them smartly, please. Abstinence
is key here.
Right.
God. Yeah. Well, I think abstinence is, again, it's like anything else. It's a great way of controlling what people are doing and telling people what to do. And again, making a moral judgment on something that has no morality tied to it. Like, I don't know if people hearing this need to hear this, but it's okay to have sex and enjoy it.
Yep.
And do it as much as you want. As many times with as many people, as long as you're doing it safely and it's all consensual, folks. Because guess what? As long as those two things are met, it's literally not a problem at all.
And we have access to so much information now.
Right. The internet and applications that allow you to meet people you never would have met otherwise. Like, come on, folks. Don't be conned into this idea that you're not allowed to feel good, because the people that are telling you that don't want you to feel good. I know. Shocking.
No, because then that ruins their whole shtick.
Yeah. We're not supposed to enjoy ourselves now. We're miserable now so that we can enjoy ourselves later.
Yes.
Yeah. Fuck that. Okay.
Sure. Sure.
Right. So speaking of control and keeping things from people, the thing that I wanted to talk about is, unlike pretty much anything we've talked about on a Haunted State episode up until this point, I wanted to talk about Japanese Airlines, otherwise known as JAL, a cargo flight that they made in 1986. That well, it was cargo flight 1628. And what did they encounter? Over Alaska, well, they encountered two unidentified objects, which I guess we would call UFOs. Can we talk about that before we get further into the story? UFOs is a term that it doesn't mean it's an alien.
No, it's an unidentified object. That's what it means. It is in the most literal terms of all literal definitions of each of those words. Unidentified flying object.
So I mention that because I feel like it's important to reinforce the fact that something can be a UFO and be completely terrestrial.
Yes. It could be a drone. It could be a plane. It could be Superman.
Well, and in these complicated times, technologically, there are all kinds of things that it could be that we can't even fathom.
Balloons.
Right. Well, I mean,
yeah,
weather balloon.
We don't know what other places are working on. We don't know what we're working on. Like, come on. We have no idea what the American government is working on, like at the highest forms of like technologically advanced weaponry and spy stuff.
Right. And they're not going to tell us because that's the point. They're not telling us intentionally because there's clearly something about it that needs to be protected, which is fine.
Even if that is to just not incite panic.
Right. Which I think there is some of that. I get that all out of the way because, again, I believe in aliens and the existence of them. I know you do as well.
See.
But again, for a lot of people, it's kind of a touchy subject. And I think recently UFO and that term with what was going on over the Great Lakes last year, where there was like, oh, they were shooting things down constantly and hardy har. Isn't it aliens? Like, no, it's UFOs. Maybe. Right. Maybe the government doesn't know what they are, which, by the way, anyone listening, if the government doesn't know what something is and they're still shooting things down and they're saying that out loud, that the optics... Right. And the optics of that are worse than if they did know what it was.
We don't know what it was, so we exploded it over something.
Yeah.
It could have been a thing full of just like chemicals, but we just took it out.
See Eastern Ohio. Yeah. But that's the thing. Again, like, it's weird to me because the term UFO now, it almost feels like when someone says UFO, they mean like the expectation is alien. And like, it's not, and it doesn't need to be, and it shouldn't be. And I say that only because the conversation and the dialogue on UFOs, I think the longer we're around as people and the more technology we get as a society, I think the conversation is going to shift in weird and interesting and exciting ways that we can't anticipate. But that term UFO is going to become more and more commonplace. And I think we just need to be cognizant of every time someone says UFO doesn't mean it's an alien. It means we literally just don't know what it means.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's been, taken over by science fiction and pop culture and things like that. And typically, if you say UFO, people think you're talking about aliens. Yes. I feel like recently there's been some like kind of move to change to like
UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenons.
Yes.
Which I think is what NASA calls them UAPs.
Right, to get away from the connotation of aliens, because yes, it has been completely taken over by alien culture.
Yeah.
Like that is.
Yeah. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. And again, I want to mention that because again, I've been reading a pretty interesting book that kind of goes into the history of ufology. And so, ufology is, again, like, ufology in and of itself is kind of weird because it's the study of unidentified flying objects. But like you said, is it aliens now? Like,
right.
Like, is that aliens or are we talking about unidentified flying objects?
Yeah, it's very muddy now because especially with, I think, there's also been a move in that group of people to kind of get away from the ancient aliens type of reputation that has been cultivated over the last 10 years or so. 20 years. I don't know.
Well, ancient aliens has been a thing since the 70s, but like the prominence now is fueled by prominence is fueled by that show.
Yes. And so I think that there's a move even within like people who are actually like ufologists that are studying for the potential of extraterrestrial life to move in a more science-based package, essentially, like changing lingo, changing approaches to how, like just getting away from that concrete, it was aliens type of idea, because that is very damaging to ufology and studying unidentified flying objects, whether they're aliens or not. They still need to be, investigated.
Well, and they need to be investigated in a serious way.
Yes.
And that's the thing. I mean, the book American Cosmic by D.W. Pasulka, if anyone is interested in actually kind of exploring the serious debate on this and kind of the way that academia has been, I think, maligning the discussion, but also kind of having a discussion because that's the thing. In her book, they kind of talk about this idea that they're having this conversation about UFOs and aliens, but they're not having it out in the open. It's being had behind closed doors because people don't want it to reflect poorly on them. They don't want to go, I saw aliens. Like, I mean, you and I spoke with Geraldine Sith Sutton. I mean, her family, they're considered crazy because they saw Kelly Hopkinsville. I seemed perfectly normal to me. I believe that they saw something like, again, but then we come to something like this.
Do I know what it is? Absolutely not. Do I believe they saw something? Yeah.
Right. But I can't say what it right. But there are plenty of people that can say what they know it wasn't. People, it wasn't aliens. Well, then what was it? Oh, it was an owl. Well, okay. Well, could be, I guess, but it could be aliens too. Like, unless you can prove it was owls, then it could also be aliens, which is, I know that that's hard to stomach, that if you can't prove it isn't aliens, it could be aliens or UFO. Right. It's still unidentified either way. Yes. So all that aside, so this JAL flight 1628, it took off November 17th, 1986, and it was flying over eastern Alaska when it saw not one, not two, but three objects that followed it and seemed to be trying to interact in a way with the ship. So they saw what they believed to be, and one of the captain of the ship describes it as like shooting off lights. But if you look at the artist rendering, what it looks like they saw was like stacked. You know how if you're like a stadium, like a football stadium, and you were to stand on the field and look at the lights that are shooting down at the field, it looks like that. So that could be interpreted, and the way the captain of the airliner interpreted it was the back of the ship. So he interpreted as they were seeing the back of the ship, or maybe the front of the ship with the thrusters. But these objects, these again UFOs, they interacted with them, and they were like escorting them at one point and interacting with the plane. I mean, and again, in a way where it seemed like there was some intelligence to it. So initially they take off, they're flying over eastern Alaska, and these two objects kind of show up, and they start cruising with them for a while, these rectangular kind of shapes that are flying. And then they leave after, I guess it's probably like 10 minutes, 12 minutes. So
wow.
It's an extended period.
Town.
Yeah, it's a long period of time. Kenji Terayuchi, the captain, said at one point, the thing was flying as if there was no such thing as gravity. It sped up, then stopped, then flew at our speed in our direction, so that to us it, quote, appeared to be standing still. The next instant, it changed course. In other words, the flying object had overcome gravity. And you hear that a lot with these stories, where it's like the thing made a move that what we perceive to be terrestrial technology can't do. Because I don't know if anybody knows this, but if you're in an airplane can't just stop in the middle of the air.
No. Yeah. There's not break.
Bernoulli's principle is what keeps the plane in the air, and that is the antithesis of Bernoulli's principle, because you have to be moving for it to be an effect. So they're more talking like a helicopter, but helicopters don't exhibit thrust because that's not the way that they work either. They're hovering above the ground and you're tilting the hover to move forward. They're not being propelled forward by anything. So what he's essentially talking about is something that's able to move forward, stop, pivot, and then go forward with a large amount of inertia, which that is 100% breaking the laws of gravity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when the pilots in the airline contact traffic control, they're like, hey, we're seeing these things. What's going on? And air traffic control is like, there's not any traffic where you are right now, so you shouldn't be seeing anything. And then these things, these unidentified objects, they come and they're next to the plane as it's flying, and they're undulating up and down. And they're getting brighter and darker and brighter and darker. And then they just disappear. But not like, I don't know, like just a little while after, they're flying along. And then all of a sudden, a giant, again, I'm going off of what he said. This is the captain again speaking. He said that it was twice the size of an aircraft carrier next to, in the sky, back to the left of the plane. And it followed them in formation as they were turning and descending into Fairbanks. Into the Fairbanks airport. So, yeah. Is that crazy? I mean, they saw these two things. And again, they saw these two little things that were following them. And then all of a sudden, after those things disappear, there is some sort of large object.
Right.
About 10 o'clock from the plane. So behind it to the left. Yeah. Or maybe. Again, like, who knows, right? Again, that's somewhat my interpretation, that these may be like sensors or drones that come out that gauge whether or not something is a threat. And then, again, I can't tell because, again, it's not made clear. Was that thing that they saw, that the captain and the others saw behind the plane, was it meant to be, were they trying to be seen? Was it only seen because of the technology that we have? Like, it's never that part of it I can't figure out.
Right.
But what's interesting is it is kind of a two-stage interaction, which would lead me to believe, like you said, like there is what is going on here? Like, what this thing may have some intention to it that we're not able to understand.
Right. And that it is something that it's essentially, like you said, sent out drones or whatever, presumably to test the plane to see if it's, a threat of any kind. And so what we're talking about is that they effectively see the mothership.
Right. Yeah. Or yeah, something to that effect. And the crazy thing is, due to an incident that had happened, well, I guess it would have been 40 years earlier. So it was a pretty big incident. We've never talked about it on the show, but the Mantell UFO incident was the first time, and I guess the first time or one of the times that the U.S. government sent an Air National Guard in a P-51 Mustang to chase after something.
Yes.
Guess what happened?
They wrecked.
Yeah, and they died. Yeah. And what may have happened was they discern possibly that he may have been chasing an early test for the Skyhook balloon, which the Skyhook balloon, for those of you who saw The Dark Knight, is the thing where, you have a balloon that goes into the air and you have a plane that comes by and catches it. And it's used to, take people out of really hard positions to get them out of otherwise, battlefront, the front lines, what have you. I mean, again, it's never actually been used. I don't think, not in any substantive way, but it looks cool in movies. I mean, it does. It's even in it's in Patton. Even they use it in that movie to pretty great effect. But what they think may have happened was the U.S. government essentially sent a plane to go after itself unknowingly, and so there is no element in this story of interaction with the U.S. government and the UFO.
And that's why I don't believe in completely classified missions.
Well, someone
has to know, so things like that don't happen.
Well, and that's the other thing. I mean, ultimately, when we talk about something like, the U.S. government mobilizing a Mustang to chase down a possible Skyhook experiment, which is, again, the government going after itself unknowingly, I can understand why they wouldn't want to, the Anchorage ATC wouldn't have. Like, they said that they offered it to the pilot, the captain of the plane. And he was like, Hey, like, do you want us to get military intervention? He's like, no, because of this thing that happened before. So I get it. I get why he wouldn't want to, like, maybe have that on his conscience if something happened. But it's a weird story because, the ultimate thing about this that's kind of strange is it's a sighting that lasted almost an hour, and it ended near the Denali mountain range, the peak, which is the highest peak in the United States or in North America. But the other thing about all of this is it's a small crew of people because it's not a passenger airline. It's a cargo flight.
Right.
So it begs the question, was that drone out there looking for a plane full of passengers to interact with and they didn't see anything? Because, again, it's like a UPS flight, right? Like, or FedEx. Yeah. Like, they have to fly planes with a skeleton crew to get from point A to point B, and they don't need
I'm sure
30
planes
people.
are in and out of Alaska all the time too. I mean, like you're going to really far out remote places of Alaska, likely to be dropping off supplies and stuff to
or going over the Pacific Ocean. I mean, again, because this is a Japanese airline, so JAL. So this isn't even American. This is a JAL flight that's crossing over into Eastern Alaska. So I don't know what to make of this. It feels like a pretty interesting encounter.
It's definitely one of the more, because it has the most components, right? Most of the time when we hear about unidentified flying objects that are perceived to be alien in nature, they're like these little dots, or little triangles or little just smaller lights that are there and gone in an instant.
Right.
But this is one that lasted, like you said, almost an hour, that it had multiple interactions, like they were interacted with and then the things disappeared and then were back again.
Right.
So, that coupled with the seeing of a much bigger object. I mean, I don't know. Look, pilots, I gotta assume that these pilots are professional, upstanding people. I don't have any reason to discount or doubt what they'd be saying. And also, again, when we've asked this again many times, in particular regard to Kelly Hopkins, what is there to gain telling stories that effectively make you appear to be the crazy person to a lot of people?
Captain Terauchi got more or less sent to desk job because of this, because he spoke to the press. He spoke to the Kyoto News, and JAL didn't like that. So they were like, guess what? You're on a desk job now. He was reinstated. He was reinstated after the fact as a pilot years later. But I mean, again, in general, there's almost never anything to gain from these situations in being the person or people that tell you about that go to the press, that go to the government, that go to wherever and tell these stories. There's never any monetary value. Any of the fame that you get is more of in the infamy category, right? In the less dangerous and more just, oh, look at this weird person that says these weird things to people. Can you believe that? like Kelly Hopkinsville. Again, you're seen as pariahs in your own community because those are the weirdos that believe in aliens. Right.
And if you're a pilot, I got to think you really wanted to be a pilot. That's not a career you just fall into or decide to do for funsies for a little bit. You have to work really hard to become a pilot. You have to be a very responsible, trustworthy individual to be a pilot.
Yeah.
So this person's character, I have no reason to doubt that they are not a sane, responsible, reliable person. Now, did anybody else in the crew agree, back up the story in any way?
Yeah, they all did. They all supported it. And what's funny is, so I mentioned the captain of the ship ended up going to desk duty, and then it was investigated by the FAA for 3 months, and they essentially said, the controllers did see something eventually, but it was the radar being fucked up. So that's what it was. It wasn't actually anything. And then outside of that, the crew maybe saw something, but we don't know what they saw. We didn't see anything enough on our end to support whatever the hell they're saying. And then, after the fact, Philip J. Klass, who's a very well-known UFO researcher, not a debunker, a researcher, he wrote in his book that Captain Terauchi had apparently claimed to have seen UFOs 2 other times, and then 2 other times before that. So the question then becomes, well, what did he see those other times? If he was seeing the same thing here, maybe he is I think Klass uses the term UFO repeater. So someone who's constantly seeing UFOs. I mean, look, with his job, he's up in the air. What do you
Right.
expect him to see?
Right. I mean, most UFO sightings come from people who are flying.
Right. I mean, class does say like, okay, maybe he's using the term spaceships and motherships too often. But I mean, again, like it's that same thing of like Bigfoot hunters going into the woods and seeing things. Like, who else is going to see things if
Right.
not Bigfoot hunters? And look, this is a job, a profession where you're not there by, like you said, you're not there by accident. Like, you want to be a pilot, you're going to be a pilot, and that's going to be the job you're doing. And you're going to find yourself in
And
a
you have
cockpit.
really good vision. So
Right.
It's not like me driving down the highway at night for, if I'm on a long road trip or whatever and things start to look a little funny on the road. That's just fatigue and, optics and light optics and things like that. But yeah, you're a pilot, you're up there. There's not a lot of light. There's probably no light.
Right.
There's no light. You do have good vision. Presumably, that's a pretty big requirement to be a pilot, as far as I know.
Right.
So, and yeah, I could, is a UFO repeater like somebody who's like particularly sensitive to ghosts? Like when they see them all the time, like, are you particularly sensitive to otherworldly technology?
I don't know. I mean, again, it begs that question. So,
But the alternative is, if it's not aliens, it is either the U.S. government or some other government doing some weird shit. And I'd rather it be aliens.
right. So the science explanation that is put forth is that it's Jupiter and Mars, very bright though, and apparently the misinterpretation of planets, stars, and other things in the sky that are celestial in nature, apparently that's common to misinterpret those kinds of things as UFOs. I mean, again, technically it's still a UFO if you can't identify what it is, even if it is some sort of like body in the sky.
It's unidentified to you. So
right, exactly. Like, still technically an unidentified flying object. But I mean, is that a fun explanation though? No. But is it one that might make sense? Sure.
I feel like I can buy that for the thing that he saw behind him.
Right. Totally. I'm with you on that. Like a big thing behind the plane.
Yeah, but you can't really see. Okay, fine. But for two objects that are you said rectangular. So
like squares. Yeah, they
square.
Sharp angled in nature is not something that involves nature in a lot of ways.
Flying with moving with the plane. The planets aren't moving with the plane.
Right.
We would know that. We would notice if that happened.
Right.
Something horrible would happen if that happens.
Exactly. And that's where I'm coming from. It's like you in a lot of ways, I feel like that explanation, I could get behind it with some of it, but not all of it. And unfortunately, with something like this, like, how could half of the explanation? I mean, it could make sense because there are two sightings here. I guess that's the only kind of saving grace here that would allow it to be, it could be one thing and technically also something else. Mm-hmm. Because again, like you said, I mean, I kind of believe that the thing that he saw behind the ship may have been like a
planet. That was.
But that doesn't explain some of the other stuff. Like, that doesn't explain the first thing that they see.
No, so maybe the things are bouncing around with the plane and moving around.
What if they saw a UFO?
Gymnastics.
What if they did see a UFO, but then they also saw a planet? Or do you think there's a possibility that they just didn't see anything?
That maybe they saw a UFO from that planet.
Fair. But I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, is there a possibility that they did see something and didn't see something at the same time?
I mean, I think so. I mean, look, I mean, you're in the sky. There's all kinds of, who knows?
And it's nighttime. I mean, again, but to your point,
it could also be like a big cloud formation too behind, like the thing behind them. I feel like is more an add-on to the main event, which is the two objects that were actively interacting with the plane.
Sure.
Because once you're already in that brain, like, you're okay, fine. You're the pilot or the crew members who are on this plane and you've been seeing this thing happen for a while. Likely your brain is also going to like potentially manifest other things that you're going to see because you're already in that mindset.
Right.
But So the thing behind them, I don't know. I feel like that is probably more just a result of being, completely
Suggestible
disoriented
state.
and
Suggestible
surprised.
state.
Yeah, but if what he says and everybody else on that plane says is true, that they were followed around essentially by two objects, then I just don't know how that equals planets.
Right. That first part I don't. That second part I get it, but yeah, I have a hard time getting myself to that point where it's like I have a hard time getting to the point where I could say, yeah, that's a planet. Like
I would likely, logical brain me is more inclined to it's a government thing.
Like
some sort of experiment. Some sort of testing, light. I mean, maybe they're testing some sort of disorientation tactic, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be wise to try it on civilians, but the government has done things before, so
right. What's to say they wouldn't again?
Right, exactly. So, I mean, like that would be I feel like the science explanation in this case is a bit too wishy-washy. But it was probably a government testing thing that I can probably believe. And then obviously that would be why he would go to a desk job and why, they would push this out of being like, oh, he claims to see these things all the time.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean that would make sense as to why he's easy to discredit.
Right.
Oh, he saw these things all the time. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, I feel like, I don't know what they saw, but I think they saw something. I think that's more or less guaranteed. I guess the ultimate question in a case like this becomes, what does it mean if they saw something to begin with? Like, what does that mean? Because ultimately, when we talk about things like in New Mexico or in Las Vegas, again, two places where we know things have happened, Area 51 and Roswell, like two places in this country terrestrially where there are sightings constantly of things and people going, there are aliens here. Right. So
people being abducted.
Right. And the question becomes ultimately like, if that's going on up there, is it just military? Because I think some of the stuff in Las Vegas is totally just military. Obviously, Area 51 is there. The stuff in New Mexico, maybe even that. I mean, again, people were seeing stuff in the 40s, White Sands, Los Alamos. That was a thing too. But
I think that there is a probably equal amount of what is potentially extraterrestrial versus what is government shenanigans. I think that there are equal amounts of both of those, and I think that that the government really gets a free pass with how much they've made everyone who is, has interacted with aliens seem very crazy.
Well, I mean, if you listen to any of the times our dear friend Mr. Scavarla comes on the show, that is a topic of frequent discussion, is the usage of government forces and government funds to
because look, it also
subvert what people are doing. And well, I mean, again, like,
because it takes attention away from if okay, fine, if it's not aliens, then is it the government fucking around with shit? And if so, what are they fucking around with? Why are they doing these things? What are their intended purpose?
Right.
And they don't want, those are, if the government hides things from itself, why would it not hide almost everything from us? Like that is just, I think, a naive thought if you are assuming that the government would never lie about something to cover their own ass.
Well, and I also don't understand why anyone would believe the government would release anything seriously that we should believe is actually, like, we should never believe that if the government is going to declassify something, they're not declassifying it intentionally. Like they are,
like it's deemed appropriate for the public. And here, and I'll say this, I'll play devil's advocate and say that it's not, exclusively because they're doing bad, dark government things. I think that if there is significant proof to like a Roswell situation or something like that, that people, the general public, would lose their fucking mind.
Right. Oh, totally.
As a collective, and it would become chaos. Like I feel like, because let's say that in this situation, everything that we've heard about aliens is, true, that they are abducting people and doing things to them, that Roswell is a thing, that, all Skinwalker Ranch is this, hub for extraterrestrial interaction and teleportation and shit like that. Say that all that's real, people would lose their shit.
Right.
They would lose their mind, because it would destroy every belief system that everyone in the world has.
Right.
Effective. Well, not everyone, but
the people that have
very
them.
Powerful people.
Right. Well, and the people that have them, for sure.
Yes.
Because it's like, the people
the
that
Catholics, the Christians, the Protestants, all of those people that we were talking about before that were making up cautionary tales about not fucking around in your car. Those people would lose their mind, because their whole world that they have built would be destroyed in one fell swoop.
So is it safe to blame religion then for the lack of proof and evidence for UFOs?
No.
I think just throw them all under the bus collectively. I mean, I wouldn't do that, but like you could.
I think it's people, right. And and you can say it religion is just another form of tribalism, right? Like
a form of control.
Any form of conformity in large group is an inherent human thing, because of from an evolutionary standpoint, from a biblical standpoint, from a cultural standpoint. I think that it is just humans are going to make up these things that bring them together. Not all of them together, but enough for them to feel like they're a part of something in a community and have people that are, they can rely on.
Well, and I think also I think
that if we didn't have religion, it would just be something else. And sort of cult. Like, look, like
right.
Cults, religion, fucking, CrossFit people.
Well, no, I mean, you're completely right. It's just the amount that it's taken hold and the amount that it's taken like control over things. Because in a lot of ways,
yes,
the conversation and the dialogue that we have about these things is dictated by the belief by some people that to reveal the truth of these things would make the people that they're worried about completely uncooperative in society moving forward.
Yes,
that's really what it is, right? Like
that's what I'm saying. Like, people would lose their shit because they would lose all control of everything they thought they had control over.
Right.
Like, look, if you found out that all those fucking things I mentioned were real, like we woke up tomorrow and it's like, oh yeah, you can totally teleport from Skinwalker Ranch to some other fucking dimension. Are we paying our bills anymore?
Right, exactly.
Are we going to work anymore?
Right.
Are we going shopping for shitty IKEA furniture anymore? Are we doing any of those things? No, we are not. Human nature is about to take a whole turn.
Right.
As to how it acts, as to what it does with this information, to how quickly people are like, start fighting with each other about what certain things mean. I mean, here's the thing. There are still also going to be evangelicals that are going to say that this was a God thing. Like, so then you have that aspect of it, of people who are thinking that like the end of times have come.
Right.
And people would lose their shit. So yeah, I do think that obviously the government and what other corporations powers that run the world effectively, and in particular our branch of the world, absolutely are also keeping things from people to not incite a complete destruction of what we know humankind to be right now, and like how we function as humans in this world currently.
Well, and I think like anything else, I mean, I think in society as a whole, there are people that want to lead, there are people that want to be led, and there are people that want to be dragged. And I think that the people that want to be dragged are okay with it. I think the people that want to be led are okay with it. And I think the people that want to lead so badly that they're okay with letting everybody else be literally in the dark, which is fine. I mean, it's just fine.
And
that's their prerogative.
It works two ways, right? Because even you and I, to an extent, choose to live in the dark about a lot of things.
Right. Totally.
Because it would fuck up our way of how we go about our life and cope with life and manage life.
Right.
So, like, yeah, we could jump down a lot of rabbit holes and start going, like, really breaking into things. But as, individuals are like, I only have this one singular life and I don't know how long it's going to be. And I already have a lot of mental turmoil. I don't need to do more of it to myself.
Right. And I'm with you there. I mean, that's what I think about when I think about things like this. It's like, okay, this is the thing that I choose to be animated about. And I understand that I may die and never get an answer on this. And that's fine. I'll get an answer when I'm dead, because then you'll be able to view this third person and whatever the fuck. But yeah, it's very strange to me, because
like, how much would you really want to know if you could know it?
Right. That's the other question. Be careful what you wish for, right? Like,
yeah. Like, I want to, there are things I definitely know I want to know. I want to know if the Loch Ness Monster is real. I want to know if Bigfoot is real. I want to know if aliens, like, if actual intelligent life has been contacted. I don't need to know all the details.
Right.
But just that it is fact that is a thing that exists. Because if it's fact that a thing that exists, you know what that proves to me? I've continued to live my life up to this point as is, with them being completely real and there, and I'm fine. So
right, that's fair.
Great.
Yeah. No, I think
I want to know what lives at the bottom of the ocean. Absolutely not. They can keep that to themselves.
Well, I think it comes back to the question of, like, would you get on an airplane if you knew there was a giant pterodactyl that flew around and took an airplane down once a month, like, or once it, but right, but like, there are plenty of people that would.
You get on the subway again if you knew that, like, mole people were real,
and that they, like, fucked around every now and then with the subways? I don't know. Right. I mean, I don't know, but there are plenty of people that would. Yeah. So again, it comes down to this. We've
also built a culture around stuff like that. We have things like X-Files and Unsolved Mysteries and all of these things where it proves, that people are curious and interested in finding things out. But you talk to people who've been abducted, not all of them, most of them don't want it again.
Right. They're not actively going out to do it again. They live in fear
that it's going to happen again.
Exactly. They're not actively as excited as we are, and they look at people like us who are excited and go, what the fuck?
I'm good. I never need to be abducted by an alien. I'd like a ghost encounter. But that's for my own, like, honestly, if I can say anything, that's for my own sense of, like, mortality of, like, if I have a ghost interaction and it's undeniably a ghost interaction, I'm like, well, okay, cool. I'll be a ghost. That's fine with me.
I mean, I guess I would like, I don't know. I mean, I've had an interaction with what I believe to be something I couldn't explain, and it wasn't scary, but I don't know if I'd want to have it again. So I get it. Like, as someone who's had that experience, I get where you're coming from too. Cause it's like, don't know if I want to have that experience again, but I'm glad I had it the one time I had it.
Right.
So look, I don't know what these guys saw. I think they saw something. I believe that they saw something, but like anything else, when you see things over the continental or United States writ large, I think it always comes with a large amount of, I don't know.
I want to know about the Bermuda Triangle. That's what I want to know about.
I don't think there's anything to the Bermuda Triangle. Dead serious. I think the Bermuda Triangle is just...
there is a space. It's not the Bermuda Triangle, though. That's just the thing that the government has told us about. But there's actually some space elsewhere that is like the Bermuda Triangle. I think that there's a lot of shit in the sky that a lot of people see.
I think it's more likely that there is something like the Bermuda Triangle and we don't know about it than that there is the Bermuda Triangle and it's that, because to say this one area has a bunch of ships disappear, but yet ships and airplanes fly through it all the time. Like,
right. But statistically, if more ships and aircrafts are disappearing in a certain part, then there would need to be a reason for it.
Yeah. But also,
and if they're not being, like surfacing, like pieces and parts of them in the ocean, which there would be. I mean, ships, especially like planes, I'll give you planes hit the ocean hard, and I'm sure, a lot of it mangles into a lot of little tiny pieces, whatever. But whole ass ships disappearing,
right?
With nothing, no life jackets floating around, no lifeboats, no nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think ultimately, in a lot of ways, the Bermuda Triangle, I don't know. I'm with you, but I'm not. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know. The Bermuda Triangle, I think, is like, it's a weird thing, but I'm not sure it's anything more than just a weird thing. Does that make sense?
Just one of the world's most random mysteries of just like, yeah, I don't know.
I also wonder,
people really just lose their vision in this part of the world.
Well, I also wonder, like, ultimately, isn't there the likelihood of a place like that being on the Earth pretty high, that there's somewhere that lots of things happen? Just statistically, isn't that probable? I don't know. Like, Bermuda Triangle's weird. It's just weird. Like, it's like a 70s thing, Like,
I feel like if there's something happening consistently in an area that is weird, stands to reason there's a weird explanation for it.
Or a shockingly mundane explanation that is so boring we haven't contemplated it.
And that's fine.
I don't know. I'm not saying one or the other. Like, I would like for it to be what you're saying for sure. I would prefer that.
Because what does that mean?
I would prefer it to be weird and not like, something like so boringly normal.
I would like to know that there's something more interesting happening in the world than just day to day. This is what you get. What you see is what you get.
Right. No, I'm with you.
That is more depressing.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. That would be more depressing for me to find out that this is
that, like, absolutely nothing is real. Not a single thing. Not one thing. Not even God. Nothing.
And reality really is boring, folks. Jeez Louise. I mean, that's what it would feel like. So, oof. So yeah, that's why we do what we do, and that's why we're here talking about the things that we talk about. So that's Alaska, folks, and it's haunted, sort of, maybe. It's weird, that's for sure. Yep. Mermaids and aliens. So, Jess, until the next time we do one of these, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at WriterJessFired. Pretty much everything I do is filtered to there in some capacity. You can also hear me on other podcasts at the Weirding Way Network, Weirding Way Media Network, such as Chris and I's other show, the One Season Show, although that has been on hiatus for us for a while, but there's plenty of good stuff to listen to in the interim. You can also hear me on various episodes of the Culture Cast, various episodes of the Bollywood Cinema Club, and even a few episodes of the Projection Booth.
Yeah, Projection Booth. That's where it all began. That's where it all ends.
Bum, bum, bum.
As for me, weirdingwaymedia.com is where you can find all the stuff that I work on. Like just mentioned, there's a lot. So if you're interested, head on over there. As for this show, ScaryStoriesWeTell.com, Scary Stories WT on social media. And that's where you can go for that. Big thanks as always to Maggie and Dustin for the behind the scenes stuff that they do, along with our good friend Alex Malnack of Blondo. He provides the music for the show. You can find him kicking around the Midwest, and you can find Maggie at DolanMuseum.com. And as for us, we're going to let our former, As for us, we're going to let the former host of Sightings, Mr. Tim White, lead us out.
No mystery is closed to an open mind.